We're going to move on to the next presenter, and that is PhD student Omar Christobal. He's going to talk to you about ruminal fermentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Linda says, thank you, Linda, for introducing me. We are going to talk about rumen fermentation, or ruminal fermentation, especially in lambs at weaning these lambs at 2 different ages, at 4 and 6 weeks. The transition, well, the weaning process, or the weaning, is pretty much established during, it's quite important to, the transition from milk to solid feed is one of the most important stages during the reading program, especially because it's the time where the lambs start, I didn't have, sorry, you know they have a monitor up there. So pretty much the solid feed intake of these animals help to stimulate the rumen development, plus the production of fermentation byproducts like ammonia and short-chain fatty acids, especially butyrate and propionate, are the main drivers that stimulate the rumen development, and as well as the accumulation of short-chain fatty acids in the rumen that decrease the pH and also stimulate the papillae development. So, it's quite important to understand the effect that the pre-weaning management have especially in breeding practices, to understand the rumen fermentation of these young animals to optimize the weaning transition of these animals. So the aim of our experiments were to investigate the effect that weaning lambs at 4 or 6 weeks have on ruminal fermentation profiles during the pre and post-weaning periods. As well, based on that, we hypothesized that early weaning of lambs using a step-down weaning system will stimulate the pre-weaning intake of starter diets as hay or meals, which will support an early establishment of the ruminal fermentation. So, based on that, we did this experimental design. So, where we used 32 animals that we split basically in 2 groups, an early wean group that were weaned at 4 weeks, and a control group that it was pretty much weaned at 6 weeks. So we use a step weaning method, which was the decrease of the initial milk allowance that was around 20% of the body weight of the animal, and we start to drop down this intake in a weekly basis by more or less 5% of the initial body weight, until weaning that it was at 4 weeks in the early weaning group and 6 weeks in the control group. So all these animals during this 6-week period, they have access to ad libitum meal and fiber as a hay. After this period, these animals that were indoors were transferred into a paddock of good quality forage like ryegrass and clover, and we kept the supplementation or the starter supplementation during 3 more weeks until week 10, when it was gradually removed. So we took rumen samples basically at 4 weeks. Half of the groups were slaughtered at 4 weeks. The other half was slaughtered at 16 weeks. And the analysis that we carried on were, we measured the rumen pH, the short-chain fatty acid contents, and the ammonia in the rumen. So the results that we got at 4 weeks, the ruminal fermentation profiles were, we didn't find any difference in the total total concentration of short-chain fatty acids when we compared the animals that were weaned at 4 weeks or 6 weeks. And when we see the individual profiles or the individual proportion of these short-chain fatty acids, we didn't even see any differences in the major short-chain fatty acids that are acetate, propionate, and butyrate in between groups, not even with the minor short chain fatty acids as valerate, caprolate, EUC-butyrate, and EUC-valerate. For ammonia, we have higher concentrations in the early win group and a lower one in the control group. This may be because this control group was eating more fiber or more hay than the early win group, and also the early win group eat slightly higher or quantities of meal that it has it has more protein in the diet, a little bit more. When we talk about the fermentation or the profiles at 16 weeks, we find pretty much the same results. We didn't find any differences between the control or early win group. And when we look at the proportions of these short-chain fatty acids, we didn't find differences in the major short-chain fatty acids, but we find a difference in the caprolate amount, having major concentrations or proportions, of caprolate in the early win group than in the control group. However, this amount of short-chain fatty acids or these concentrations are so low that couldn't have a significant effect in the rumen. For the ammonia, we didn't find any differences in the ammonia concentrations, not even in the pH of these animals at 16 weeks. The key findings for this trial were, when we compare animals weaned at 4 or 6 weeks, both groups have similar concentrations and individual proportions of short-chain fatty acids, even when the ammonia concentrations of the early wean group were higher at 4 weeks compared with the control groups. So this could be pretty much related to the feed intake that these animals have. And 16 weeks, we didn't find differences in the ammonia concentrations. Ruminant pH was not even affected, also for the age at weaning. So we can conclude that the ruminal fermentation can be pretty much established in lambs at around 4 weeks of age using a step-down weaning method. Being quite important to have early access to starter diets to stimulate the feed intake at these early stages. So I want to acknowledge to all the institutions that were part of this project. MBA, iResearch, MESI, my supporters, New Zealand Aid, INIFAD, CONACYT Mexico, and the industry partners, and as well to my supervisors and the technicians that work pretty much in this project. So, sorry. Thank you.